live. I think yesterday I accidentally read a chapter twice. I apologize, but it was a wonderful chapter and I'm not sorry. Today is June the 29th, 2023, and I'm reading out of Life as Carola. Carola is the illegitimate daughter of Lord Griffin. She is a life of Joan Grant. Joan Grant was a writer. She died in 1989 and she used to write books about her farm memories. And I read The Winged Pharaoh already, and this is her second book, published in the late 1930s. And it's a fascinating story about Carola, who was born on the 4th of May, 1510. So it's before the Renaissance, and we are now at chapter 10. They have been banished from the castle and her mother is dead. She was stabbed. Chapter 10. Love and Lucia. It was nearly 2 years after I met Lucia that I noticed a change in her. And at first I did not realize that it was because she and Bernard had fallen in love with each other. She sang love songs when she thought no one was listening, and wore her red velvet dress, which she used to keep for fiestas, when there was only Bernard to admire her. Now, if one of the men who had been listening to her singing in a tavern tried to pull her down onto his lap, she no longer threw her arms around his neck, as he fumbled with her bodice, but tweaked his nose or scratched his face in a fury. If the innkeeper grew angry at seeing his patron so disgruntled, Bernard, instead of telling Lucia not to be a fool, as once he would have done, used to ask him, "Do you want me to show you how a man's head can be twisted off his body like a stalk of an overripe pear?" Bernard, in love, reminded me of a dancing bear, when a wooden spoon sticky with honey is held just out of his reach. He was always finding some excuse to be alone with Lucia, and when we were travelling he might say, "Listening to Petruchio and Carola talking together makes me as sleepy as if I had eaten a trough full of suet pudding," and then ask Lucia to go ahead of us and keep him company. He was very generous to her, and gave her a new dress of fine cloth with a satin underbodice. But when he offered to buy her a pair of earrings from a peddler, she was scornful of them and said they were too gaudy and only fit for a strumpet, and she asked him to give her a little silver crucifix instead, like the one my mother had worn. Lucia, who once had so despised all housewives' work, used to go into the kitchen and offer to help with the cooking, just so that she could learn to make the things that Bernard liked to eat. She always hoped he would marry her. I don't know what difference it would have made if he had been her husband, for already they worked together, travelled together, slept together on the same pallet, so she could not have seen any more of him had a cardinal united them. She came to love him with an almost idolatrous devotion. When he smiled at her after one of his moods of drunk despondency, from which she suffered so often, her eyes lit up as if she were a peasant woman praying in front of a miraculous virgin, and saw the wooden lips curve into a smile. Now that she was possessed by this strange foster child of love, she no longer saw him as he was. I once saw myself in an old mirror distorted almost beyond recognition, and it was as if Lucia's eyes had become a mirror which reflected Bernard's, so that all the follies that distorted him were smoothed out. His stupidities turned to wisdom, his irritation to a just wrath. He was no longer strong as a bull, but mighty as a hero. He was no longer a tavern entertainer amusing himself with a reformed harlot, but some god of ancient raising a moral to his own statue. Some god of the ancients raising a moral to his own statue. Sandra. When I was 16, we stayed from June until the vintage in a Tuscan village. As we were to be there such a long time, instead of lodging at this inn, we lived in a little house, which was owned by the landlord of the pick and wine press. It was small and had only 2 rooms, but it stood by itself in a vineyard that sloped down to a stream. I found it very tranquil, perhaps because I knew that for a while I should sleep in the same place today and tomorrow and again tomorrow. Bernard and Lucia shared the smaller room, and Petruccio slept on a straw-blank pallet under the vine trellis that shaded the south wall. He was always happier when he could sleep under the night sky, and he used to say that when the stars twinkled, it was because they shook at some Olympian jest, and sometimes he could hear an echo of the gods' laughter. The larger room was furnished with a table and 2 benches. They did all the cooking, and I slept in a cupboard bed, which was built into the wall. I smiled when I thought how scornful Maria would have been if she could see my kitchen. I had no spit, no rows of copper pans, no carp to stuff with goose livers and herbs, only an iron cooking pot that hung from the chimney chain, 2 earthen bowls, a knife, and some wooden spoons. There was not even a pair of bellows, and I had to blow on the reluctant flames to kindle the sticks I had been collecting. We played every evening at one or other of the village wine shops. One day a travelling artist who painted inn signs heard me singing, and he promised that he would paint for me for my pleasure, so long as I should sing for his. I told him that Lucia was the singer, and I only the lute player, but he said, "There may be painters in Italy who are much greater than I am, but I think my treatment of an ear, a throat, or the curve of a shoulder unrivaled. It is unfortunate that no one shares my opinion. No doubt there are singers whom some might claim were sweeter than you, but I put no value on other people's judgment." He told me to call him Sandra, but I didn't believe that was his real name, because altogether he pretended to be a vagabond. I think that once he must have been rich, or at least had noble patron, for his clothes, though old, were of fine quality, and his voice had the ring of a great house. He loved singing. He loved sitting in a tavern, where he could watch people without their noticing, because to him they were as exciting as an old parchment to a scholar. He showed me a portfolio filled with sheets of fair paper, and some of them were covered with many drawings: a nose, a hand, a woman in sorrow, a child in joy. He used to make quick drawings of Bernard, and they made you see the strength stored in his swelling muscles, and the skin moist with the sweat of effort. Sandra often came to our house. He made life-size drawings of me on the wall. In one I was playing a lute, with my hair unbraided and bound by a chaplet of vine leaves. There was Carola stirring the cooking pot, and a Carola sitting in the sun, plucking a capon. So lively were the lines of his red chalk that I began to think I had 3 sisters. Every morning he filled the bucket for me at the stream, and often he went with me to the fields on the other side of the river to gather mushrooms or cooking herbs. I was very happy while he was there, and I began to hope that he was poor, as we were, so that he might decide to join us and travel north when we moved on. I found that I could talk to him almost as easily as I could to Petruccio, for he was never afraid of hearsay. He did not believe that things happened in the way I told him they did, but he was not imprisoned in the little world of things that people can see and hear and touch with their hands. When I told him that I could fly when I was asleep, he thought I must be dreaming into the future. He said, "One day men will make themselves wings." I think Icarus was a man who became a legend, a man who was caring to do something that one day many people will be able to do. If a bird can fly by the power of its own wings, there must be sufficient buoyancy in the air to sustain my weight. If I can but find the way in which my strength should be utilized to overcome the attraction of the earth. It may be that I myself will challenge an eagle to a race. What consternation there will be in rookeries when I descend upon them. I shall draw men as a bird must see them, not striding like giants, but as puny midgets, squat and foreshortened, their upturned faces gaping in wonderment. Will they run into their churches to seek protection from this monster of the skies? I said to him, perhaps I could teach you to fly my way before you are ready to show me yours. I am too impatient to wait for sleep to show me things. It is from earth I wish to rend the secrets, not from a heaven. The earth herself is full of miracles. She's only waiting for a man to persuade her to perform them for him. Visions and prayers are fit for nuns and priests, but I am too content with what my eyes can see to wish for their sight. Carola, why do you welcome me into your house and share your food with me? Me, a drifting vagabond, who sometimes forgets even to thank you for your charity. Because I know that you are one of my kind of people. I have met so few of them. I think only my mother and Petruchio. How do you know I was? It was the first day in the tavern. You were sitting on the bench under the window, drawing Petruchio while he was jesting. I was watching you, and I saw that you drew only his hands, his long, beautiful hands, and his face. Anyone who had ever seen Petruchio would have recognized him from your drawing, but they would never have known that he was a dwarf. They would see him as I see him, wise and beautiful, with heaven in his eyes and kindliness in his speech. Sandra was pleased. One day I shall be a great painter. Even ordinals will forget that I am a heretic, and beg me to decorate their cathedrals. Princes will cry my name in greeting, hoping that I may be so gracious as to lay my colours on their palace walls. When that time comes, you may see yourself as a goddess, and Petruchio as the shepherd of God. It may take you a long time to become so famous. Will you still remember a lute player and a jester? It may be that I shall have forgotten the sound of your voice, but the way the hair grows from your brow, the curve of your wrist, the arch of your foot when you walk so lightly through the meadows, are stored away in my portfolio, ready to make my eyes see you again. It may be that I shall have forgotten how I have laughed with Petruchio, how I have talked with him of strange philosophies through the long evenings of a Tuscan summer, but when I need to paint St. Michael, or perhaps the young St. John, or a hand riven to a crucifix, it will be Petruchio that I shall see. When you see my pictures, Carola, will you think of me? My life is in taverns. We do not go to cities where there are great cathedrals, nor play to entertain princes and cardinals. Perhaps in the future, when both of us are dead, I may return to Italy and see them. Sweet Carola, when you are dead, if any of the fantasies are true, you will be playing a lute among the clouds, and your poor Sandra will surely be in hell, painting the brides of Satan for a wage. Don't you believe anything I have told you? They are beautiful legends, and I believe in everything that is beautiful with that part of me, which is an artist. But I am also a man, and not a visionary. It is in my drawings that I shall find my immortality. He came to the house very early before I was awake, but I would know he was there. He has been there, for when I opened the door, I found my bucket had already been filled with clear river water, and there would be a flower floating in it as a greeting. One morning, instead of water, there were 6 gold pieces in it. With them was a drawing of Sandra dressed as a rich courtier, kneeling before a goddess with my face. I used to watch for him to come back, but I never saw him again. Whether he became a great artist, I never knew, because he did not tell me his name. So that's the end of the first part of chapter 10. The next one is entitled Ghost of the griffin